Rain threads the night like wire. Thin, cold lines glint in the streetlight, slipping off the hood of the parked car and needling through my coat as I step out. 2 houses down, my windows burn bright as if the house has a heartbeat. Music thumps. Laughter bounces off the wet pavement. Wine glasses meet with a bright, chiming certainty that feels like a dare. At the gate, my father sits on the low cement lip, knees drawn up, his coat a dark, wet shell around him. He's shivering in rhythm with the bassline leaking from the living room. His hands, old hands, scarred by a lifetime of work, are laced together like he's somewhere between a prayer and a surrender. He looks up when he hears my shoes on the waterlogged gravel. "Son," he says, breath fogging pale in the air, voice trembling. "Why won't they let us in?" Just a question. Soft. Innocent. It slices clean through the rain, through the music, through me. My throat tightens. The entire night narrows to the way his eyes search mine for an answer I don't want to give. I unlock the gate. The deadbolt refuses, like the house is choosing sides. I try again. Inside, someone laughs too loudly. The laughter scratches the glass and skitters across the lawn. "Come," I say. "Let's get you warm." "I'll be fine," he lies. He's soaked to the bone, water stippling the thin gray of his hair, trickling along his jaw. "It's their party. Guests, you know." I look past him. In the living room, bodies move, silhouettes streaked with gold. My wife, barefoot, spins with a cousin, hair loose, the hem of her dress curling under her feet. My glasses. My plates. My floor. A wood I chose when money was tight, sanded and varnished on hand on a Saturday night, while she slept on the couch and my father handed me nails and stories about patience. A car splashes by. Its headlights sweep over us. In that bleached moment, the house becomes a stage, and we're the people who did not get tickets. "Wait here," I tell my father. I move to the door and knock. Knuckles on wood. 3 times, spaced like a signal. Through the pain, a cousin pauses mid-sip. My wife glances up, her expression folding into something I can't read before she turns away, and the cousin shrugs. The bass climbs. No one moves. At the gate again, my father is standing now, trying to look like the night is nothing but a small inconvenience. "He should have called me earlier," he says. "They said the guests would not be comfortable." His mouth works around the word like it tastes bad. "How long have you been out here?" "A while." He smiles to prove he's all right. The smile cracks. "I'm not a man who shakes. Not at work. Not when my mother died, and I held his shoulders while he staggered. Not when the foundation of this house was poured crooked, and I fought the contractor with receipts and photographs. But the tremor that runs through me now is not in my hands. It's in my chest, skittering along the ribs." Rain thickens, washing the music into a smear. I breathe, slow. The smell of wet soil climbs up from the garden beds my father keeps. Mint, basil, marigold, a scent that should mean home. It doesn't. It didn't start here. It started quietly, with the small things that do not bleed in photographs. A dinner table, 4 plates. My wife's parents criticizing the amount of salt, the angle of the forks, the way my father swallows. "It's not healthy for old people to eat late," her mother said, sliding his plate away like she was saving him from poison. My father laughed then, too. A soft, embarrassed laugh, the kind he uses to smooth other people's discomfort. He ate outside that night. The porch light flickered. He didn't mention it. "Are you cold?" I ask. "A little," he admits. "We're leaving," I say. He blinks like I've told him a joke. "Where?" "A hotel," I tell him, "just for tonight." He looks back at the house as if it might change its mind, as if houses can apologize. He nods, not trusting his voice. I walk him to the car and tuck him in as if he's the one who built me from wood and patience, as if I can return the favor in a single motion. The heater breathes life into the cabin. I place my hand on his shoulder, a weight, a vow. "I'll be back," I say. He reaches for my wrist, squeezes once. "Don't make a scene," he whispers. The old reflex. I almost laugh, not because it's funny, but because a part of me is still that boy who learned to be polite to survive other people's chaos. I close the door gently. The rain has found its tempo again. On the walk back, the night rearranges itself into two lanes, before and after. Before, the house was a diagram of love. After, it is Exhibit A. I stop under the eave, rain drumming inches from my face. Another snapshot. The first time my wife suggested he move in. "He shouldn't be alone," she said, fingers cool on my wrist. "We'll be his family." I remember the shininess behind my eyes, the relief, the childish gratitude of a man who wanted someone else to be good so badly that he mistook a promise for proof. Inside, her father raises a glass. "To new beginnings," he says. The words carried to me in a warm, mocking ribbon. New beginnings at my table in my chair, while my father breathes steam on the gate? The deadbolt still resists. Of course it does. I chuckle once, a sharp sound that feels misfiled in my throat. I don't try again. The back porch light is still broken. I flick it anyway. It stutters, coughs, dies. My key slides into the kitchen door, the one nobody remembers because we always use the front. It opens with a soft, offended sigh. The kitchen is a crime scene of celebration. Sticky wine stains, glitter confetti that will never fully vanish, footprints drawing in loops and arabesques across tile I picked for its forgiveness. I strip off my wet coat and lay it over a chair. The chair is upholstered in the fabric my wife said looked like summer light. It looks like a weapon now. I do not call out. I move to the hallway and watch them from the dark. My wife's hair slicks to her temple with sweat. She's mid-laugh, mid-life. Her mother is decorating a story with her hands, bracelets chiming as punctuation. Her father is sprawled with the comfortable cruelty of a man who believes the room belongs to him. My father's door is closed down the hall. On the frame, a smear of something dull and brown. Probably tea, probably nothing. I press my fingers to the wood. The humidity raises the grain under my skin. I picture him inside that room the first week he lived here, folded sweaters in the drawers, framed photo of my mother on the nightstand, the way he kept opening the closet like he was checking if it would continue to hold him. "Babe," my wife says, turning casual, almost tender. She squints into the hallway, searching the dark. "Is that you?" I step forward into the light. Her expression is a door slamming and opening in the same second. The room hiccups into quiet, and then corrects itself with a new topic, a new toast. She crosses to me, presses a kiss that never lands, and wipes imaginary rain from my cheek. "You're home early." A beat, then, like she's solving the puzzle. "We didn't expect you." "Not home," I say. "Just visiting." Her mother tenses. Her father's eyes sharpen the way a blade finds an edge. The cousins, sensing a draft, drift toward the kitchen. Music keeps playing, but it's quieter now. The bass an animal holding its breath. "Your father knows it's a full house," her mother says, a smile that doesn't loop her eyes. "He agreed it would be better if the guests were comfortable." I finish, looking from face to face. I heard. "Let's not do this," she whispers. "It's raining. We're in the middle of—" "Yes," I say. "I noticed." I let the silence sit. Let it make its own shape. Rain rinses the windows. The house listens. In that held moment, my mind splits into a map of the last few months. The camera nestled in the shelf, sculpture nobody likes but everyone compliments. The microphone threaded into the seam under the couch. The little red light that never blinks because it never needs to. The cloud drive that hums invisible and faithful. The neat folder names, dates, voices, statements, like a polite clerk. My heart should be pounding, but it isn't. It moves with the steady patience of a hinge. Behind me, the kitchen clock marks seconds with a click that sounds like nails being counted. My wife shifts, assuming the old choreography. Hand on my forearm, tilt of her head, tone designed to thread through my ribs and remind me of our beginning. "Can we talk?" she asks, eyes wet. "Just us." "Of course," I say, because I'm still the man who built a home on the belief that we could be decent to each other. Tomorrow. I look past her at the front door. The deadbolt sits there, fat with finality. Beyond it, the night, the gate, the place my father chose to make himself small because he was taught that kindness means absence. Her father lifts his glass again, an attempt to reassert gravity. Don't, I say. Not loud, not even sharp, but something in the word is a note he recognizes. His mouth shuts around it. I take one step toward the living room. Water lets go of my cuffs and freckles the floor. My wife reaches for my hand. I don't give it. I could shout now. I could list the insults, the nights, the small humiliations lined up like soldiers. I could recite her mother's sentence, "That man smells like the grave," or the whisper that followed, "He'll be gone soon, I'll make sure of it." I could let the recordings speak in this room, let their own words echo back with the ice-cold accuracy of a mirror. I don't. I turn, cross to the side table, and pick up the framed photo of our wedding. We are sunlit there, reckless and new. My father is standing behind me, a hand on my shoulder, eyes damp with pride. I put the photo down, carefully, face down. "Where is he?" my wife asks, voice small now. "Warm," I say, which is more than I can say for this house. Something in her buckles. "Please. Tomorrow," I repeat. On my way out, I flick the broken porch switch again. The bulb coughs a ghost of light, enough to throw our shadows up against the glass. The party inside, me outside. A negative of what a home should be. The rain greets me like an ally. The gate is still open, my car still running. I slide behind the wheel and exhale a breath I don't remember starting. At the curb, I check on my father once more. Hotel key on the dash, heater humming, blanket from the trunk drawn over his legs. He's drowsy now, finally thawing, the lines in his face smoothing into something closer to rest. Tomorrow, things will change. He only opens his eyes long enough to find mine. He nods, that old, dignified nod of a man who learned a long time ago how to trust what he can't see. "I know," he whispers. I pull away from the curb. The house shrinks in the rear view, a stained jewel in a black throat of night. The music becomes a tremor, then a rumor, then gone. Rain fills the silence, steady, tireless, patient. And somewhere between one street light and the next, I feel it settle inside me. The last piece. The click of a lock turning. The hinge of before and after closing on the night. Tomorrow begins now. The hotel room smelled like lemon cleaner and microwaved coffee. My father slept with his mouth slightly open, the slow, even breaths of a man who had been taught to make himself small so others could be comfortable. I watched him through the bathroom mirror as I taped the last microphone under the hotel armchair. Small, disposable, mine fit in 2 battered suitcases and a cheap laptop. I worked nights now, not because the office required it, but because the house no longer felt like mine until I had watched it empty, filmed it breathe, cataloged the way other people's feet rearranged my floorboards. I learned how to make wires speak without blinking. I learned to hide metal in a vase and paper in a book. I learned the cadence of my wife's laughter when it was real and when it was cut from something meaner. At the apartment, my name on the deed, but not yet in the rooms the way names become tenants of one another, I planted a camera behind a decorative plate on the mantel where guests said it matched the set. It faced the doorway and tracked the angle of anyone who walked in. Another camera, the size of a gumdrop, sat inside the lamp that everyone admired because its light was soft. A microphone lived under the couch, tucked into the seam like a whisper. They never noticed the little betrayals. They noticed only the big ones. The new rug I had chosen because it hid boot prints, the sudden arrival of a handyman who claimed the back door needed realigning, the smile I wore when I said, "Of course, you're always welcome." Their arrogance was a furnace, and I was the patient brick mason, spreading mortar line by line. The files stacked up like tax returns, waves and MP3s labeled by date and location, small titles that felt clinical next to the venom inside them. 2025-07-18 living room, mother-in-law. 2025-07-31 dinner, porch. I listened late into mornings, cup after cup of tea cooling on the table, while my father thinned into sleep at the hotel. The poison arrived in polite sentences. At first, the comments were jokes, barbed with a smile. "Old people smell like the grave," someone said once, and it ricocheted through a cousin's laugh like glass. Another night, a cousin leaned close enough to whistle breath on my neck and joked, "He takes up too much space, doesn't he? Rooms are for the young." They kept saying it as if repetition would make it truth. Then my wife, the woman who once cradled my mother's hand as she breathed out, said something that did not fit the person I married. She said it in a soft, almost domestic tone, the kind used to make threats feel like care. "He'll be gone soon," she said, stirring her drink, as if the words were sugar. "I'll make sure of it." When I heard it, the first thing I did was laugh, a hard, incredulous sound. It echoed off the tiles and landed on the microphone like a confession. I replayed it until the words were a groove burned into my skull. My hand shook not with rage, but with a slow, terrible clarity. The man who had promised me his life in the hospital bed had been replaced by someone who wore me like a coat and hung me on the peg of convenience. I collected receipts in folders, bank statements, signatures, the quiet legal language that makes ownership enforceable. Each document was a nail in the box where I kept the truth. I refinanced like a sleepwalker, quietly in the middle of the night when the world left its doors unlocked. The bank called me a day later to confirm a signature, my voice recorded and archived. My lawyer said the word trust with the reverence of a man who knows how power sounds. The trust was a simple device. Place the property into a legal cradle that kept it from being shredded by greed. Add my father's name, make the beneficiaries his. Set the papers to tape shut, so that even lawsuits would be met with the patient solidity of paperwork. It took months, and it took more patience than I ever thought I had. I signed where needed, smiled to the camera at the bank, watched men in suits nod as if my calm was a currency they could tax. Back at home, the cruelty softened into texture. Her mother rearranged the silverware with a possessive hand, as if arranging forks could rearrange loyalties. Her father gave my father nicknames that had the sharpness of a paper edge. "Old man," he said once in front of guests, and it landed faster than a stone. My father would laugh to hide the splinter. I set rules for myself that felt ridiculous at first. No confrontations in public, no fury in the kitchen, no midnight calls saber-rattled into the dark. Instead, I compiled, I cataloged. I took every slur and packaged it into evidence. The microphones found adjectives I wouldn't have believed possible. The exhale between words when they talked about inheritance. The tiny celebratory clink when they discussed making sure an old man was out of the picture. There were nights when I remembered my mother's face and felt like a traitor. I remembered promises whispered on a hospital cot. "Look after him." The words were heavy as a boulder. The work I did was not only for retribution, it was for the preservation of dignity. for the right to be the son who kept his promise. One Saturday, my wife hosted a welcome for a cousin that turned quickly into a thing of entitlement. They strode past my father's room with the careless cruelty of people who know that someone else will wash their conscience. I watched the footage the next morning. My wife's head tipped back as she laughed, a hand on her father's shoulder. He told a tasteless joke, and she responded with a look that I recorded and saved. The camera caught the way she avoided my father's eyes when he passed by the dessert table. The microphone caught her laughter darken when he sat to tie his shoe. When I confronted myself with the evidence, when I pulled the files together and played them in sequence, I felt something shift under my ribs. Where grief had been flayed raw by their words, a plan took root. Not revenge for the sake of hate, a reweaving of the map. They had misread the quiet. They had thought patience was the same as timidity. So I waited and waited, waiting for the moment that made their cruelty undeniable. It came, sometime between 2 phone calls and a box of unopened mail. An invitation, stamped and embossed, to a celebration at my own house. The subject line was a casual cruelty, family gathering, open house. Inside, the details were bright and thoughtless. Guests, they wrote. Please wear something comfortable. I could have told my father. I could have said, don't go. But he called me when the rain started, voice small on the line. They told me there's no room for us tonight, he said, and then cleared his throat like apology. Guests won't be comfortable. You understand. I heard the hallway noise in the background, the soft clinking of porcelain, the muffled, arrogant certainty of people who believe their appetite bigger than a human heart. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the car at the curb outside the house and listened to the audio again and again, each replay turning the words into evidence and the evidence into permission. The cold drank at my hands through the steering wheel, and my breath came in measured clouds. I imagined my father standing exactly where he had been the other night, waiting for someone who would not move. When I finally stepped out, the rain was a needlework of sound. I locked the car, walked the angle I had memorized from the security feeds, and watched the door through reflection. My father sat at the gate like a small, dignified stone. The music inside made the glass vibrate. For a moment, one blessed, terrible moment, I saw my father in the reflection and not the house. He looked back at the light and turned his face away. I held the recorder in my pocket like a rosary. The device hums faintly when active. It held syllables that would make the world tilt. I thought of handing the evidence to the police, then to a lawyer, then to the court, but I was not yet ready to expose the method. There were legal sigils to place, documents to sign, and a few more nails to set in the box. I was mapping a slow demolition that would be clean and absolute, a house of cards rearranged by the firmness of law. On the feed that night, my wife leaned close to her mother and said, in a voice I had now come to know as dangerous and domestic, "He'll be gone soon. I'll make sure of it." The words were small in the room, but giant in the archive. I took the file and burned it into a sealed folder labeled with a single, merciless title, Proof. I drove home with the heater pushing warmth into my numbness, rooting my hands over the folders like a priest. My head was a map of steps, trust formation, beneficiary changes, the title stamped, the eviction notice drafted, my lawyer ready. Each step had been timed and checked, a machine with tolerances and fail-safes. The worst of it, the heart of the revenge, was not in shouting or in chaos. It was in the patient, brutal arranging of facts. When I parked, the house was a silhouette, a dark tooth serrated against the late sky. I could hear nothing but the sound of the engine cooling and the distant life of people who ate in comfort. I placed my palm flat against the steering wheel and made a decision that landed like a pebble in a still pond. The night that would break them was coming.
I had everything I needed to fold their search words, greed, cruelty, mockery, into legal steel. I took the recorder from my pocket and listened to that small domestic voice again. It didn't make me feel triumphant. It made me feel like a man who had finally found the exact piece he needed to finish a puzzle he had been assembling in the dark. Tomorrow, I told myself, the world would begin to correct. But tonight, I parked in the shadow and watched my house and let the rain do what it does: wash and wait.
Morning found the house hungover. A disco of spilled light pooled over a trail of napkins, a toppled chair, a smear of lipstick on the rim of a glass. It smelled like someone had tried to bottle celebration and failed. The door creaked when I pushed it, a small animal waking in a cage. Their laughter from last night lingered like a ghost that had not yet learned to leave. I walked through the rooms like a man doing an inspection after a storm. The mantel watch, camera 2, caught my shoes scuffing tile. The microphone under the couch hummed soft, waiting to breathe out the night's conversations like a sleepy witness. I set the folder on the coffee table and let the pages slump open like truth obeying gravity. They were still inside. Her father lay across the couch with a scarf bunched under his head, a half-closed hand sticky with cake. Her mother was raking through a jewelry box, coughing when a bead broke loose and flashed like contraband. My wife sat on the dining chair where the cushions were depressed, the cousins dotted the room like mismatched ornaments. When she saw me, the room went slack in a way I had come to recognize, panic trying on the shape of calm. "You're home early," she said, the phrase thin and tired as if she were reciting instructions to a room that might forget its manners. "Not home," I corrected, "just visiting." The words dropped between us and landed on the folder, heavy and patient. I placed the eviction notice on top of the financial printouts, so the angle of paper told a story of priorities. The notice had been printed and signed 3 nights ago. The lawyer's number was on the back of the page in black ink, like a threat dressed as help. Her father snorted when he read it, eyes blurring past the letters to find a joke. "What is this? A prank? A mistake?" No mistake. My voice was a flat instrument, tuned to exactness. "You were given 30 minutes to vacate." Every face rearranged into different registers of disbelief and anger. Her mother's laugh soured, a canary note of someone losing pitch. The cousins blinked like they were learning to read for the first time. My wife's mouth opened and closed around a series of rehearsed entreaties. She began to speak and then stopped, as if she were checking for the right lie. "Kasim," she said, my name the one I hear sometimes like a student call back to the front of the class. "You can't. This is ridiculous. I invited you them. You hosted them in my home. You told my father there was no room. This is not a decision I made lightly." Her hand trembled as she reached for the folder, fingertips skimming the edge like a moth testing a flame. "We can talk about this," she said, voice edging to pleading. "We can fix it. You said it yourself." And the room inhaled the sharpness of the memory. "He'll be gone soon. I'll make sure of it." Silence folded over the living room and pressed until the wallpaper made a noise. Her face drained color the way money drains from a wallet. Her father stood up slowly, the old entitlement wobbling like an aging statue. "This is extortion. You can't. What legal quack sold you this?" A door opened behind us and my lawyer stepped in as if he had been part of the staging all along. He wore a suit that looked like it could speak for him. His presence collapsed the theater of protest into the courtroom of fact. "Good morning. I trust you found the documents." Faces shifted, counting steps backwards in their heads. Her mother dropped a string of pearls into a bag as if the weight might steady her. Her father swore, a low volcanic thing that almost knocked the chandelier. "This house," my lawyer said, clicking his pen like a gavel, "is under ownership details we've discussed. The trust has been executed. Your right to residence has been revoked under the terms we filed and served last week." "You forged papers," her father roared. "Everything is legitimate," my lawyer answered. "Signatures verified, beneficiaries changed.
You have legal options, appeal, mediation, but for today, the occupants must vacate. They moved then. Panic is a poorly led army. It breaks into clumsy formations. Her mother carried bags with greedy speed, shoving bracelets and scarves into plastic sacks like the textiles would erase the shame. The cousins filled pockets with electronics. Her father paced, flinging words like pebbles, as if noise could smother consequence. My wife fell to her knees at one point, hands splayed on the tile, voice raw and pleading. Please, please don't do this. We'll leave. We'll leave now. Just, please. She looked at me with the kind of raw plea that believed property was a negotiation and love a bargain. There was a time when I would have been moved. There was a time when I would have been the man to fix the fracture with words and a weekend retreat. But this morning the ledger in my chest had pages that could not be turned back. Go, I said. Not mean, not violent, just the authority of someone who had already done the work of undoing them, the quiet competence of finality. They left in a scramble that would make for better gossip than dignity. Her father slammed the car door in a way that might have tried to kill the lock. Her mother kept whispering about humiliation. The cousins kept glancing back like children fleeing a fire. The neighbor's dog barked as if to point at the absurdity of a family hobbling out with their spoils. When the last car hummed away, the house exhaled as if something that stank had gone. The air inside seemed cleaner for a scalding second, like a pot rinsed under hot water. I stood in the doorway and let the quiet settle on me like a cloak. I called my father then, the sound itself a kind of release. I said, "Come home." He arrived with slow steps, cautious as someone testing ice. When he opened the door and saw it empty of those who had elbowed him aside, his face trembled with a soft breakdown, shock folded with relief. He took in the bare dining chairs, the absence like an absence can be, a blank that is both empty and full of breath.
"This is your home, Dad," I said. "Always was, always will be." He looked at me as if seeing the blueprint of his life being redrawn. His throat worked. "But I pushed my pride away for them," he murmured, the old resignation that once took the form of self-effacement. "I thought—" "You did enough," I told him. "You did more than enough." He sank into his chair, the wood groaning as if a timepiece had wound down. Tears came then, not the explosive grief of loss, but the slow, cleansing sorrow of someone who had been allowed back into belonging. After the lawyers left, there were more papers to sign and formalities that smelled of rubber stamps. The house became a ledger of the morning. I walked the rooms documenting things that felt important. My father's cups in the kitchen, the blank space on the mantel where the camera had sat, the small lamp that had watched everything and now blinked nothing. I unplugged the microphones and wrapped them in a drawer. Evidence is a cold thing. It deserves to be stored with respect. My wife came upstairs later, cleaned of jewelry and argument, hair pulled back as if every action might be a penance. She moved like someone who had been stripped of all theatrics. She stood in the doorway of my father's old room and looked at the framed photo of my mother on the nightstand. For a second, something like shame flickered through her eyes, maybe recognition, maybe regret. She reached out and let her fingers hover above the frame, not touching it. "Can we talk?" she asked. The plea had become smaller, less theatrical, more human. I considered the question the way one considers a locked safe. There were words I could say, explanations, accusations, apologies. But I realized I was not interested in unpicking the seam of revenge to stitch up an old marriage. What had been done by both of us over time, by silence, by complicity, by the slow erosion of vows. "Not now," I said. "Maybe later." She nodded, and for the first time in a long time, there was neither pleading nor anger, only the simple, raw weight of consequence. That evening, my father made tea. The clank of the kettle sounded domestic and holy. We sat at the table with mugs between us and the house around us quiet and intact, its bones reset. Outside, the light on the gate glowed like a lighthouse for a place that had weathered its storm. He looked at me over the rim of his cup,
eyes softer now, a man unmasked. He said, "You did right. Perhaps it is the duty of sons to keep the promises their mothers make dying, to guard the small places that make a life livable. Perhaps revenge can be a kind of devotion when it protects the fragile." I did not answer him with rhetoric. I only reached across the table and placed my hand over his. In that touch, there was an accounting done and a reckoning ended. The house that had become a theater of cruelty that night had been made a home again by something less dramatic: stubbornness, documentation, and a refusal to let love be bulldozed by greed. Tomorrow, I told myself, there would be work to do: repair the snapped hinges, repaint the scuffs, return neighborly smiles. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept without rehearsing the past. The house slept too, finally uncluttered by those who would make a place someone else's problem. The night held its breath, and for once exhaled with relief.
Afternoon light poured through the empty windows, soft and merciless. The furniture looked different now, stripped of its audience, honest in its silence. You can always tell when a house has been emptied of liars. It breathes deeper. My wife stood in the middle of the living room like someone who had forgotten how to move. Her hands dangled at her sides, hair damp from tears or the rain, maybe both. I had seen her cry before, but this was different. These weren't tears for love lost. They were the kind that come when someone realizes the performance is over and there's no encore. "Do you hate me?" she asked. The question didn't surprise me. Guilt always wants a definition it can bargain with. I didn't answer right away. The sound of the clock filled the space between us. Tick, tick, tick. Steady as judgment. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "I hate what you allowed." Her shoulders shook. "They're my parents." "And he's my father," I said, quietly, but with enough gravity to shift the air. "The man who built the bones of everything you see here. The man who held my mother's hand when she took her last breath. The man you left outside your own gate." She flinched like the words were physical. I turned away, walked toward the dining table. The sunlight caught the glass of water sitting there. A perfect metaphor. Clear, still, reflecting everything but itself. She followed me. "I didn't know it would go that far," she whispered. "That's the problem. You never wanted to know." He chuckled softly. "No, I mean, you love too hard. You carry things until they break you." I looked up at the sky, a dark velvet stitched with a few stars. Maybe some things are worth carrying. We sat in silence for a long time. Somewhere inside, a door opened. My wife's footsteps creaked down the hallway. She appeared at the threshold of the courtyard, wearing a shawl and holding a suitcase. Her eyes were red, but calmer now. "I'm leaving tonight," she said softly. "I called a cab." My father looked at her, then at me. I didn't move. "Do you want me to say anything?" she asked. I shook my head. No words left to fix this. She nodded, as if she expected that. Then she turned to my father and bent slightly, her voice fragile. "I'm sorry, Baba." He didn't answer right away. He just studied her face, the way old men do when they're searching for the last flicker of goodness. "You're young," he said finally. "May you learn to protect what's real next time." Her lip quivered. She whispered a thank you and walked toward the gate.
The taxi's headlights cut across the garden, then disappeared into the street. The sound of the gate latch closing echoed far too long. Days passed. The house healed in small, quiet ways, like a wound that knows it can't stay open forever. My father returned to his morning routine, watering plants, wiping the porch railing, feeding the stray cats that came to beg for crumbs. I started working from the study again, though most days I caught myself staring at the rain-streaked window, listening to the sound of emptiness. One morning, while organizing papers, I found the wedding photograph, the one I had turned face down. I flipped it over. We looked so sure of ourselves back then. My father in the background, smiling with the faith of a man who believes love redeems all. My mother's photo, framed beside it, stared at me from the wall with the same quiet challenge. Did you keep your promise? I whispered into the air. I tried. That night, I cooked dinner for my father. Simple food, nothing fancy. We ate in comfortable silence. When we finished, he leaned back and said, "You know, son, I don't need this house. I just need peace. You have it now," I said. He smiled. "No, you need it. I already made my peace a long time ago." He reached for my hand. His skin was thin but steady. "You did what I never could. You stood between cruelty and decency. That's not revenge. That's justice." I didn't answer. Some victories feel too heavy to celebrate. The night outside hummed with crickets. For the first time, the sound didn't feel lonely. It felt earned.
Dawn came quietly that morning. No thunder, no rain, no reminders of what had been washed away. Just a thin, golden light crawling up the edges of the curtains like a guest too polite to knock. I woke before my father did. He was sleeping in the armchair near the window, wrapped in a blanket I had brought from my old room, the one my mother sewed years ago. Its edges frayed, its comfort intact. His chest rose and fell in slow, peaceful waves. For the first time in months, his face was still, unguarded. The worry that used to live behind his eyes had finally moved out. The kettle began to whistle, soft and familiar. I made 2 cups of tea, one for him, one for the space beside him. The air smelled of cardamom and quiet gratitude. When he stirred awake, blinking at the morning light, I handed him the cup. "Good morning," I said. He smiled, small, tired, real. "It is," he said. "It finally is." We sat there, not talking for a long time. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full. It had weight, texture, meaning. Later that day, I went outside to the garden. The soil was still damp from the last storm. Dew clung to the mint leaves like tiny promises. My father's old shovel leaned against the wall, rust curling at its edges. I picked it up, dug into the ground, and started planting something new, a small sapling my father had been keeping in a broken pot for months. He stepped out onto the porch, watching me. "You're finally learning," he said. "Learning what?" I asked, pressing the soil around the roots. "That growth doesn't come from revenge. It comes from care. You fought for me, son. Now start building for yourself." I paused, the shovel frozen midair. His words settled deep, like seeds themselves. When I finished, I wiped my hands on my jeans and stood beside him. The sapling leaned slightly toward the sun, fragile but determined. It didn't know the history buried beneath it, the nights of betrayal, the quiet rage, the heartbreak. But maybe that was the point. By afternoon, the house looked alive again. Curtains open, fresh air in every room. My father's Quran sat on the side table where he used to read before dawn, a mug of unfinished tea beside it, a habit I'd stopped correcting. I wandered through each room like a caretaker of a new museum, one built on forgiveness rather than pride. In the bedroom, I found her scarf on the dresser,
the one she used to wear when she prayed. I held it for a moment, letting the fabric slip through my fingers. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, that mix of jasmine and regret. I folded it carefully and placed it inside a drawer. Some things deserve a quiet burial.
That evening, my father asked to go for a walk. The road outside our house glistened with the aftertaste of rain. Children played cricket farther down, their laughter breaking against the evening air like small fireworks. The neighbors waved, cautious, polite, curious. I waved back. Word had traveled fast. As we walked past the gate, my father stopped and ran his hand over the cold iron. "This gate," he said softly, "used to be the place where I waited." I nodded, remembering that night too vividly. The rain, his shivering hands, the locked door, the laughter on the other side. "But now," he continued, "it's where I enter." He smiled, and for a fleeting second I saw him as I remembered from childhood, strong, sure, full of quiet pride. The years hadn't beaten that out of him completely. They'd just taught him to carry it differently. We stood there for a while, letting the evening settle around us. The call to Maghreb floated from the mosque down the street, gentle and grounding. My father's lips moved silently in prayer, and I followed. When we returned, the house glowed with the soft amber of sunset. Shadows stretched long across the walls, touching everything we'd rebuilt. I walked to the porch and sat beside the door. The same door that had once been shut against him now stood wide open. The world was quiet, except for the hum of the crickets and the slow rhythm of his steps as he watered the garden. The little sapling trembled in the breeze, its leaves catching light like forgiveness catching breath. I closed my eyes and felt something uncoil inside me. Not joy, not sorrow, but peace. Real peace. The kind you can't buy, can't win, can't fake. The kind that only comes when justice and mercy shake hands. Months later, the roses bloomed again, stubborn, bright, defiant. The mint grew wild, spilling over the path like it was claiming space for everything that had once been silenced. My father would often stand there, leaning on his shovel, watching the garden with a small smile. "Your mother would have liked this," he'd say. "I hope so," I'd reply. He'd nod. "She always said homes remember the truth, no matter how much noise tries to bury it." And maybe that was what the story really was, not a tale of revenge, not even of justice, but of truth coming home. A truth that started in the rain, broke through betrayal, and ended in the quiet blooming of something new. That night, as I turned off the lights and walked toward my room, I passed my father's door. It was open. He was asleep again in that same chair, Quran resting on his chest, the pages slightly fluttering under the fan. I stood there just watching him, the man I almost lost, the man who taught me that silence is not weakness, and forgiveness is not surrender. The clock ticked softly, marking time not as a threat anymore, but as a gift. I whispered, "Sleep well, Dad." Then I closed the door gently and walked to my room. Outside, the garden whispered with wind. Inside, the house finally felt like home. And for the first time in years, I slept without waiting for the rain. The end.